Welcome to Visionaries, where we explore stories, strategies, and insights from the world's most inspiring entrepreneurs, brands, and creators. We're on a mission to help visionaries like you stand out and monetize their knowledge, influence, and message online, exploring topics like business, marketing, creativity, and personal development. Let's build your vision for a happier, more meaningful life, business, and community together. Today, I'm talking with Erik Newton about how to solve the content conundrum, a clever way of succeeding with SEO. Erik is the Vice President of Marketing at Milestone Inc., a digital marketing software and services company where he manages acquisition, content, and product marketing. So let's dive in. Erik, it's so good to have you on the show.
Glad to be here, Dallin.
I'm really excited to get into today's topic where we're going to talk about the content conundrum, more content or more visibility and audience. Tell us a little bit more about what that means to you and your skill set.
Yeah, the content conundrum is defined by a key piece of data that was developed in a large study by Ahrefs, where they observed like a billion impressions and millions of URLs and keywords. And what they saw was that 91% of content had no audience from Google. And what that means is that over time, after you launch and release your blog and do the initial social promotion for something, its long-term viability is mostly driven by search engines. And if you're not in the first 15, 18 positions, you have virtually no audience coming from Google. So that begins the content conundrum, which is it's a cool phrase developed by a guy named Andy Betts. And it's good alliterative phrase. And what it's basically saying, and the question you have to ask yourself is, do I make more content or do I bring more audience to the content that I already have? And if it doesn't take you long to think about it, that if you could do it, you'd rather do the second, because creating new content is a lot of work. I mean, it's fun too, doing what we're doing right now. And I see you're publishing about, a couple of months, sometimes, once a week. That it's good to make new content, but you do want to take care and nurture the content that already exists in your portfolio and get it more audience. So this is all a very clever and fun way of talking about SEO. SEO is really the business of getting audience to content. And since Google is providing between, 60, 70% of traffic, if you take out direct, Google or search engines is a huge channel. So how do you do SEO and how do you get your content right is the question of how you get more leverage out of the content you made last week or last month. And this isn't necessarily the case for 10 or 20-year-old content, which, depending on what kind of company you're in, you might have some of that. It does need to be like 5 years or less. So let's talk about solving the content conundrum by getting more audience to the content we have. Let's break it up into 4 buckets: accelerate, amend, extend, and append. Make it a little bit easier for people to follow if they're taking notes, or if we can put out some notes with the podcast later.
Yeah,
so accelerate means customer experience. It means page load speed. Google's put an emphasis. They gave us the warning. They gave us the 1-year warning that page load speed is going to be a big deal, content stability, and this is called the core vitals. So if your core vitals are good and your content sits on top of your website and you get your core vitals right, you're accelerating, and Google will reward you for that. You'll typically see on a really good acceleration, you'll see a pickup of maybe 10, 20 positions. So if you've got stuff on page 3 and 4, if you went from 4-second page load to 1.1 second page load, you'd see that stuff move up into lower, upper second page, lower first page. Now, in this accelerate category, let's talk about AMP, which is accelerated mobile pages, which is a markup format that Google defined 5, 6, 7 years ago. That was sort of a boomy thing at one point, and then people started saying, AMP is dead. AMP is definitely not dead. It's not being used that much. It's being used by maybe 5 or 6% of websites. What AMP does is it gives you a recipe for speed. It simplifies the page and it declutters the page, and it makes this lightweight version That lightweight version is mobile. Google sees it and Google gives you credit for it. It's a good means to an end of getting a fast page and good page experience. So that's the first one. That's accelerate.
Yeah. Yeah. This is so good. I mean, I would love to get into the other steps in just a minute. One thing I love to break down too is, first off, for those tuning in, definitely take note on what Erik's breaking down, because far too many people, I feel like, have leaned so much on, say, just exclusively one form of traffic. Maybe it's just social media traffic, or maybe it is like affiliate or other leverage traffic like that. But to me, and what has more of the longevity with the internet being around, is what you're talking about, Erik, and SEO and organic. And putting the upfront work in and getting all of those pieces optimized will serve you a lot more longer term than, say, all of the often wasted marketing budget into solely just paid ad spend.
Yeah. One of the ways I like to say that is long-term equity. It is a hassle to get things to, be in good condition for SEO, but once you do it, the long tail of benefit of this media, of this channel, I've got stuff that I optimized and got into first position 5-6 years ago. We can look it up right now. It's going to be in first place still. It's in first or second, still getting traffic for companies, companies I don't even work for anymore. That's long-term equity. That's a long-term benefit. When you use media, you get an immediate benefit. You get a lot of satisfaction. You get a lot of control. I can control the ad. I can test on ads, but I'm paying $2, $3, $5, $15 a click in paid search, and I can control my message in display. But this is getting me long-term equity for free. And I've even on a B2B basis, if you get something that does 10, 20, 30 per day, well, 30 per day is 10,000 per year. That's on one topic. That's really good. All right, so that was the first bucket: accelerate, make the pages fast, consider using AMP. Your competitors aren't using AMP. I can guarantee you, every time I look at research, it's not, I just don't see that many people using it. The next one is amend. So you amend your existing content. So you usually write something, and it's the writing and the idea is the most fun, like you and I coming up with which topic we were going to cover today. That's the fun part. And then kind of like, are we going to expand it? Are we going to, do we have to, are we getting to a certain amount of coverage of topic or depth or length? But some of the simple things you can do to content that already exists is amend the body of the content with good subtitles. And traditionally in SEO, we would say use H2 markup. I don't think it matters as much anymore, but just for simplicity, H1 is a ranking factor. Google understands that it's visible. H2s or H3s are subheads. And I think what Google likes about it is it helps organize the page. And that's a good user experience. That's a good reader experience. It makes it more skimmable. So that's pretty easy. Add subtitles every 2 or 3 paragraphs. And make them look, probably your style sheet that you're using and whatever you're publishing your blog or your site on will probably automatically do some formatting to make it look like that. But using an H2 tag is a good idea. Now, the other thing you can do on the amend step here is that you can add questions. All right, just adding questions. Think of the 4 or 5 questions that go with this topic. And if you research questions against topics, what you see is like you get a lot of what is. People like definitions. How do you? How much does it cost? How difficult is it? How do I get started? Those are the natural things you might ask, and those are the things that the audience is asking. So those, even just understanding those 5 or 6 question types will enable you to kind of efficiently go over 10 or 20 or 30 pieces of existing content and amend it with an FAQ. Now, an FAQ has 2 parts. It has a question and it has an answer. And I'm gonna revisit this when we get to appending. What do you append with to make it even stronger? Thoughts on that, Dallin?
Yeah, it's getting into the weeds more than what people actually do say on podcasts. Like, I just want to say that in general terms. And that's, I love, like, I'm taking notes for myself to be like, ooh, that's really good. That's really good. And it's something that majority of people are not even considering when it comes to marketing. let alone marketing for your website and page rank. And so I would love for you to just keep going, breaking down this framework, because based on what you shared and just some simple references to case studies, I can see that it works. And so I think this is a lot of value. So
good.
I breaking down this framework.
Yeah, I like to provide try this at home stuff to people when I do webinars. I do a lot of webinars, a lot of office hours, and number of podcasts. All right, let's go back to our framework. So we're solving the content conundrum with accelerate, amend, extend, and append. So we covered the first two topics. Let's touch on the third. The third is extending the media type. So if you come up with an idea, typically you come up with a bigger piece, like a podcast, like a webinar. And then the real work begins. The sort of the fun part is the recording and having a great conversation like we're having now. Then you got to make a one-pager. Then you got to do a transcript. And then you break out the FAQs. If people ask questions during an event, you want to attach that. A video, a short video, a longer format video, great images. So these are different media asset types that you want to create against each topic. And as you do that, Google says, "Oh, this is more robust. This is more fulsome, a resource for the people I might refer here." So those are the things you can extend. And the way you know this is working is when you look at the Google SERPs, the search engine results pages, that you can see sometimes they have videos. And they've got a video and they've got a little place marker to get the exact topic that you're looking for within a video on YouTube or another hosting site. You can see recipe information. You can see reviews. You can see images. You can see the FAQs are popping up in a couple of different ways. When you use FAQs, you'll see them at the very top at the rich snippet, which is called position 0. By some, it makes it a little more clear what we're talking about. It's above the normal results. And typically when you have that position 0, you don't have ads. So it's a very prominent, you're going to get like 17 to 25% click through. Even if you answer the question really well in the rich snippet in Google, it looks like Google's taking your content, but Google's leveraging your content, but there's a lot of traffic to go around. Then below that, typically there's something called people also ask. And people also ask is one of the more mysterious layouts. So this is that little accordion of questions where you ask a question and you click on it, it opens, it gives you an answer, and it pops out some more questions and answers. It's pretty convenient, and it often provides you that answer. What I've been able to figure out about people also ask is that those are in the top 2 or 3, the answers listed below this question, the questions and answers listed below are top ranking. They're the top ranking for these related questions. So Google sees the world in a knowledge base, or think about like a plotted graph and little connected diagrams. Those are the related topics to that question, but they're the top ranking answer. So this goes back to having really crisp definition of questions and answers, and those don't have to be standalone content like a traditional FAQ on a single page. Those can be embedded. And now that we're going to move to the fourth section, append, I'm going to give your audience another technique that they can use to what we call create entity definition. So the topic is an entity, and the question and answer are entities. And if you mark them up very cleanly, it makes it easy for Google to drop it into the knowledge base and present it. And these FAQs, even though they're embedded in your page and your media, can break out as the position 0 answer, or they can be broken out in 2 questions that appear below one of the natural listings. I mean, have you seen this listing form where like everybody looks the same, but one section has this little like PAA, it has another little set of questions, 2 questions below it. That's giving you twice as much space. You're going to get more click-through, you get a little bit more branding. So what are we talking about? So schema markup is there's 800 and different types of schemas that you can use to explain things to Google that you put in the metadata that you don't have to put on the page. So it doesn't clutter up the page with a whole bunch of busy, details, but it helps clarify, are we talking about Jaguar the cat, Jaguar the car, Jaguar the sports team, which one is it? That kind of, it's called disambiguation. So it's a markup language the same way HTML metadata is a markup language that we use to build web pages. Now they're creating this it's essentially thousands of more attributes that you can add when you append this information. So let's wrap up the model again and say these are our 4 buckets with about 1 or 2 steps in each to solve the content conundrum: accelerate, amend, extend, and append. And that will get you a lot of progress. If you think about, if 90% of your content is not getting traffic, what if 20% of your content? That's essentially double. That's 100% more traffic on a long-term basis for free, at least for no media cost. I mean, there's obviously a labor cost in getting some of this stuff done.
Right. Yeah. First off, I just want to say thank you for sharing this amazing framework. And second off, a big aspect of this too is really taking a look at what are you currently doing in these efforts and what can you clean up. That's kind of what I internalized around this conundrum, is the fact that we can feel like we need to literally put out a machine supply of content. I mean, my main business is literally called Content Supply. So it's like you're unloading all this content when at the end of the day, more content doesn't necessarily mean more business, more clients.
It depends on, there's a breadth point you want to get to. You want to be at least as broad. You want to be topically covering and touching on things to a couple of pieces of depth, but not endlessly, because then the content might start to compete with itself.
Well, and it's also the approach, I would say, is contextual to your industry, right? Or your audience. Like you think of a news publication, they're putting out multiple pieces of content a day on their site alone, or you have like more of a blogger type, who may be putting out a good deal of site content, but not at the same frequency. And you're also not catering to current trends the same way. Maybe there's more evergreen posts. And so, I mean, obviously this framework applies to all those industries, but as far as the breadth or the depth of that content, what I see is definitely knowing your industry, knowing your content, but also reading into the analytics, right? Like you want to understand how Google is treating your website, and whether what you're currently doing with your content is actually working.
Absolutely. Well said.
Yeah. Well, Erik, this has been so valuable. Could you give us just a little bit of a snapshot? We won't dig it as deep into it, but I know one thing we want to get into as well beyond the conundrum is your omni-channel marketing strategy approach. What does that look like, and how can people learn more about that?
Yeah, I guess if I would break it up into a good subhead on what to do with your omni-channel strategy is look at your big 6 or 7 channels and then really focus on breaking them up into 14 or 18 channels. So adding segmentation within your channels, like let's say referrals. Referrals are typically the best performing of your traffic, but it's usually not the highest volume, but it usually converts the best. Well, make sure you're understanding, like if you can bucket your, so you mentioned affiliates before, maybe you have PR, like this is a traditional press, maybe this is influencer. Use your UTM codes and take those UTM codes in and go into your analytics and redefine your channels and subchannels so that they break up cleanly, and you can really see where your efforts are going to get this podcast more distribution. Is it your referral? Is it your audience that's referring you? Is it other websites? Do you have an industry vertical website that's doing really well for you? So that's the first. I mean, obviously using UTM parameters, you should be doing that anywhere where you have control over the URL. So that's the first one. The big channel, as we mentioned before, is SEO. And SEO is typically going to be 50 to 70% of traffic if you kind of leave direct out of it, leave direct out of the calculation, because direct's not really a channel. Direct is derivative of other channels. Like other channels are causing word of mouth and people to know the website and come visit. So the big one you need to break out if you're a location-based business is local. So take local out. So go into GMB, add a UTM parameter, then go back into your analytics and at your top level channel categories, separate local from SEO, and you'll see a really big difference in performance. You've read the research that local local traffic has super high intent, and you'll see it converting at like 30-40% higher than organic, and like 2 or 3 times other channels. So that's a couple of the mechanisms. The other reason to break out referral is because your PR is embedded there. PR is really expensive and difficult, but it's powerful. And this is one way you can capture part of what it's doing for you. Social is interesting. You mentioned social earlier, that like maybe you're focused on social. And I think the reason we like social is because we can control it. We are the publisher, we hit the button and boom, it goes out. It is it is a great owned media, but typically proportionally it's below 3% for most of the sites I'm looking at. I have access to 500-600 different websites to kind of study and understand. And so social isn't going to contribute that much traffic, but it does give you control. And one of the things I think is good to break out, and social is also a lot of channels together. Like it's going to be LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram, and you're going to want to add this one more social that's not as closely regarded as social, which is GMB post. Google My Business allows you to publish a feed, and you can tag them, and you can put your URL on them, and you can put the UTM parameter. So make sure your social breaks down and you can understand social within social. Again, that's segmentation. Another one that's a lot less obvious, that if you're a B2B business, that your SDRs, like, typically the SDR department's bigger than the marketing department in terms of number of people. And they do a lot of email outreach. They do a lot of marketing, a lot of hand-built marketing on their outreach. Make sure the UTM parameter goes into their messages, and then you can have a channel called SDR outreach. And what you'll see with this channel is there's good spiky volume when they're campaigning, and that the bounce rate is unbelievably high. So they're able to get people to like check out a link or something, but people are less qualified. They're so far up funnel there. But that's an interesting one when you're thinking about being a good omni-channel omnivore, of like looking at sales and marketing together, and like, hey, we want to separate you out. So we want to know what kind of traffic's coming from the traditional channels, but hey, good job you guys on driving that in.
Well, and that's powerful too. I mean, just from the omni-channel approach and breaking that down, and definitely based on the size of your business, not overwhelming yourself with trying to do all of the things, right? And rolling it out. I think of a previous employer I had. Used to work for the cruise lines at their headquarters, and with the marketing communications team, they've got a global audience, and with that, they have a variety of different audience types, right? And whether it's direct mail or email, or there's all these channels that they have to really reach out to, and sometimes it's less targeted at that point, right? Because you're trying to then get to the masses versus, say, a targeted audience.
Sure. And in a B2C business like that, and travel with that high value, the high value conversion, you might have a $50-100 million budget at a big cruise line, and you've got probably 20-30 people in marketing into all the departments together, and you do want to know like what's working, and if we had some more resources, where should we put them? All right, one more comment on omni-channel is, what do you do with direct? And I say you try to reallocate direct through attribution. And there's free attribution tools within Google Analytics. If you kind of dig in on the lower left side of the Google Analytics menu, you'll find your attribution models. And what you want to do is like look at a model like channel attribution excluding last click being direct. So what you're doing is, when it comes in direct, if there's any other channel it's aware of on that cookie, or however it can see it, that it moves it to that one. So if you have typically 33% is going to be direct, but if you could get that down to maybe half that, like 17, and you reallocate 17 points, you're really getting a better understanding of the performance and the contribution of these other channels that are doing a lot of upstream work, and direct is essentially just a bit of a parasite that collects up the hard work of the other channels. So think about attribution and how you can reallocate direct from direct into any other channel, especially channels you can control.
Yeah, definitely. Well, hey, this has been so good. And one thing that I would love for people tuning in to do is to go explore more of Erik's knowledge and your company's services And I know that you have recently written a book, right? Tell us a little bit more about that and where they can learn about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so my book's called Hack the Corporate Fast Track. You can find it on Amazon. And what it does is it gives people a good playbook for getting promoted within a corporation. It's not an entrepreneur's book. It's a like, hey, most of us work for somebody else. And like, how do you do that right? It took me a while to figure it out, maybe 20 years. And so I took some of my secrets that I was sharing with my staff, and I encoded it into a book that people find pretty helpful. Now, if you're interested in Milestone, you can find us at milestoneinternet.com. And some of the things I've been talking about, some of the research you can find in the resources section, drill down into research reports and ebooks. And if we can help you out, you can contact me at erik.n@milestoneinternet.com. Love to hear from you. If you reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'm at /Erik Newton. And mention the podcast that you heard me on, and then I'll be sure to connect with you.
Perfect. Well, hey, Erik, it's been a pleasure, and definitely we'll include those links down below for the show notes. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll talk soon.